The 1950 census told me exactly when someone died. Wait a minute, the 1950 census didn't ask about death dates. You're right. This information was in a special section of the 1950 census that is often overlooked. But I'm going to tell you exactly where to find it. Unlike in other censuses, the enumerators in the 1950 census were actually encouraged to make notes about unusual entries or what they called irregular situations. And boy, did they make notes. Here's the note I was referring to earlier. It pertains to the death of Laura Geisinger. She's listed in the census with her husband Noah, but her entry is actually crossed out. You can see a little 2 at the beginning of her name. And if you look on this page and find note 2, it says she died in February 1950. But the notes that the census takers left weren't only for people who were crossed out of the census, they left notes about all sorts of things. For example, we can learn that John Patentler was planning on retiring in September 1950. It isn't obvious because there isn't a number that's actually listed on his entry. But if you look in the notes section, it says L24 will retire in September. John Patentler is listed on line 24. He's age 60 and doesn't have any occupation listed. So it makes sense that that note is referring to John Patentler. By the way, if you're curious about that line 27, on call anytime, day or night, it refers to John Wilson McComb, who was an apprentice for a mortician. But that little detail about his work schedule is something that you would have missed had you not looked at the notes section. So where do we find these notes? The most common form that was used in the 1950 census was a form called P1, and there were actually several variations of it. On some versions of the form, the notes are near the top of the page. In other versions, it's toward the bottom of the page, right before the supplemental questions. And in other versions of the form, it's actually in both places. So make sure that you're looking at the entire page so that you're not missing any of the notes. How the notes were recorded was up to the enumerator. Sometimes they would list the line number, which actually makes it really easy for us to figure out which person they were referring to. Others used little footnote numbers. The trick is tracking down the number. Here's what I mean. On this page in Bibb County, Georgia, there's a note that says, "This man is incapable of working much. His hands will not open or close due to a fall in the fire about 15 years ago." We can see that there's a little number 1 that's over a V or a caret. Where that appears on the page is next to the supplemental questions for line number 19. So if we scroll back up to the main part of the census, we see line number 19 is a man named Buford Hill. When we look at the questions pertaining to his work, we can see that they have started to write things down, they've scratched them out, they've rewritten things in there. So it makes sense that they've made a note about what's really going on with his work history. There are 2 notes on this page out of Champaign County, Illinois. Let's take a look first at note number 1. It says, "These 4 names should follow the name on line 1. They did live out of town and are visiting, but do not have another residence." So this is one of those irregular situations that the census was talking about. Normally, people who were just visiting wouldn't have been listed here in this census. But since they don't have any other residents, the enumerator decided to go ahead and list them here. But who are they? Let's see if we can find that number 1. As we scroll down the page, we can see a little number 1 right here before this entry for Ellsworth Schaefer. Notice that there are 4 people listed in this household. It also says that they are at 504 North Race. And if we look at the address that was listed on line number 1, where they should have been listed, that's also 504 Race. So that's another place we need to look for those footnotes. We need to look not only over in the margin, but also near the name. Let's take a look at note number 2 on this page. Note number 2, this man is probably 65 or older. His wife gave me this age. As we go through the page, however, there aren't any number 2s in the margins, there aren't any number 2s near any of the names, but there is a number 2 in the age column for the entry for John M. Lutz. And notice, his age is listed as 43, his wife's age is listed as 72. I can see why the enumerator wanted to call out this age as being just a little bit unusual. This example shows us that sometimes they would put the little footnotes directly in the piece of information that they're calling out as being unusual. Those little extra numbers can be really easy to overlook. And that's why, as I'm doing my own 1950 census research, I'm taking the time to read all of the notes that are on the page and then tracking down those little numbers to see exactly who those notes pertain to. I really want to see if those notes pertain to the person that I'm researching. There is so much to discover in the 1950 census. And I've put together a playlist of all of my tips and tricks to help you make more of those discoveries. So go check that out. Happy researching!